if you want to have an app that is of a good quality, make sure that your app is easy to use and understand, is inclusive by design, it's stable, including non-happy paths, and also protects the user interaction and their data, and it's built on a healthy code base that can be easily extended and maintained. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Angela. I'm working as a senior software engineer at Netcetera, and today I would like to talk to you about Android app quality. So basically, before I do so, let me share a little story about the time when I wanted to order some kitchen appliances for my home. And basically, there were two stores that offered the product that I wanted. It was just a kitchen blender. One of the stores was very close to where I live, the other one was very far away. And they both had delivery services, but then the thing was that the store that was far away was actually one that had a reputation for a high quality one. So they basically had high quality service, customer service, delivery service, and everything. But it was just a kitchen blender, so I said it was more convenient to order it from the store that is closer, and I did so. I paid for delivery to my address, and when it was the time to pick up my product, the delivery guy called me and told me that I should go meet him down the street because on that day my address wasn't on his way. And when I did pick up my product, the box was all dented. The quality seal was off, the packaging was opened, so it was just one big mess. And you know, where I come from, people have a saying that says sometimes when you try to avoid paying for higher quality, you might end up paying twice. So, in that context, it made me think of how much actually quality is valued in our everyday lives. And not only in the services we buy, but also in the products we consume, right? If we want to have a medical attention, we want a high-quality service, we want the doctor to prescribe us a high-quality medication. If we go watch a movie, we want a high-quality video. If we play a game, we want a high-quality image. If we use our mobile devices, we want a high-quality software. So how do we, as Android engineers, make sure that the software that we build is such a high-quality one, that the users will be willing to pay more to get it? Now, for that, I would say that the first thing that we should probably understand and know exactly how to define is what actually is Android app quality. And I'm sure that if I ask three different developers here, they will give me three different understandings of this and three different answers. And you know, truth be told, there is no silver bullet. So there is no recipe that I can give it to you and say, follow this and your app will be the highest quality app that the world has ever seen, right? There's no such thing. So defining Android app quality is rather a difficult task. But if you watch the latest Google I/O, there was something that they introduced, which was called the quality framework. And there I actually found a quote in the Android documentation, which I think that sums it up quite nicely. And it goes like so. So it says, high quality apps deliver value to users. So they are delightful to use, make most of premium devices, and are designed for safety. Now, as you see, this is already many things. So how do we make sure we achieve this? Well, they also define these pillars of Android quality, which help a lot, right? So they are basically organized in 4 categories, and those are core value, user experience, technical quality, and privacy and security. And today I'm not going to go into details about these pillars and explain each one. If you want to know more, of course, you can check out the Android documentation. If you haven't done so far, I absolutely recommend you to. But what I'm going to focus instead today is about some highlights that I found valuable from my experience, and I think that they will bring some significant value into building your apps in future. So, As we mentioned so far, when we talk about Android app quality, we basically are talking about the value that we deliver to the user. And this value that comes from quality then determines the user experience, which basically affects how much, how long, and even if at all people are going to use our app. And this last part, even if at all, I will come back to that later to explain what exactly I mean. But for now, let's focus on the user experience. So, here's a screen, and I will give you a couple of seconds to try and figure out what has happened here. And if you can't quite figure it out, let me help you by saying that I don't know either. And that is basically because, as you can see, the message is highly confusing. And in fact, I had a situation recently where I used an app where I wanted to make a payment, right? I wanted to make a financial transaction, I wanted to buy a product, and the app, when I pressed the button to pay, showed me a message that was very similar to this one, similar in the way that it was as confusing. And basically, the message said that the system is processing something, that something is in process. There was no loading indicator, no progress bar, nothing, just that message. So then I thought, okay, then I should probably wait a while, although there's no such indication. And I did wait, but nothing else happened. So I thought, okay, so this is probably all the information that I'm going to get. And then I thought that probably an error happened. And I started thinking where the error happened. Was the money transferred? Was the product bought? So then I had to check my account balance to see if the money was transferred, and I was confused about what is the state of my action. Which leads me to my first point, which is that we should always clearly communicate the state to the user. So the user should always, at any moment, know what is the outcome of their action. And when I talk about that, I don't mean only verbally through messages, but with every UI component we put on the screen. So basically, we should use these UI components because the Android framework offers such a nice support and foundation to be able to create such a interactive UIs which will give instant feedback to the users on their interactions. And I cannot think of a better example for this than the ripple effect, right? So the ripple effect gives us instant feedback that the application actually perceived our touch. And not only animation, but also all kinds of shapes and forms and colors, they all give back to the user information if we use it properly, right? If I had, in my case, a button that was disabled, right? While, let's say, I want to pay something, and the app is doing in the background some backend communication, security verification checks, whatever. At that time, if you show to the user progress indicator, they know they should wait. If the button is disabled, they know that if they press it and it doesn't work, it's not because your app is frozen, right? So in that way, we really make a difference in the user experience. So make sure to give visual feedback to the users. And now we might say, well, that's all nice, but my app will function properly even without all those fancy stuff, right? If you press the button, the transaction will pass nicely, even if there is no ripple effect. And I would say you're right, but right now we are talking about high quality. And when it comes to quality, details do matter. And in fact, those are the ones that distinguish your app as a high quality one from the rest of the apps. So have that in mind when you build your UI. Now, another thing that will for sure make your user experience very delightful is inclusivity. So basically, I think that we as developers can do much to make our apps more inclusive. And let me give you two concrete examples how that can be very easily done. So the first one is supporting of dark theme. Now, this is nothing new, but I believe that when you think about building an app, this is not the first thing that probably you think about implementing. But I would say that this should be rather a must than a feature, that you might possibly implement, because it's not only that it significantly preserves battery power, but it's a huge benefit for a certain user group that has low vision or is sensitive to bright light. And if you make sure that your app also supports the recommended accessibility color contrast, then I believe that that will make significant difference in your app. And inclusion-wise, there is also another thing. Well, basically, as Android engineers, it's probably that happened in your life. Some of your friends, maybe family members, to come to you and ask you to fix their phone or to fix some app, right? Or what is this notification or something like that. Well, that happened to me recently. So an elder relative of mine came to me and said, I cannot see anything in this app because for her eyes the text was too small. She basically couldn't read it. And I said, don't you worry, I will help you. And what I did, of course, went to the preferences of her device and increased the font size. And I thought I helped her, but in fact, I didn't. Because when I reopened the app, it was basically unusable. And it was unusable because it was unreadable. And it was unreadable because everything was cut out of the UI components. So even the most prominent buttons had their action text cut out. And this made me think, how many of us Android engineers actually test this scenario? So how many of us are actually aware how our applications look like when you increase the font size by a large degree? And luckily, in the latest version of Android, so in Android 14, they introduced something that is called nonlinear font scaling. And what this basically does, it uses a strategy that increases small text and large text by a different size, so in a more balanced way, which helps mitigate this issue with text being cut out. Now, what we as developers should also take care about is that we also always define, if we do so, the text size and the line height in scaled pixels, because then the Android operating system can actually take the user preferred size and apply it appropriately. Now, the other thing that I would like to talk today is stability. And if you remember in the beginning, I mentioned that I will come back to explain why quality actually impacts if the people are going to actually use our application at all. And that is because of stability. And why stability? Well, in case you haven't heard so far or read in the Play Store documentation, there are certain thresholds defined around stability. And what this means is that Play Store might actually rank down your app based on your quality. So your app visibility might get decreased based on your quality parameters. And you might ask yourself, so what are these thresholds defined around? Well, what is the worst thing that can happen to an Android app if we exclude security? We'll talk about, of course, yes. So the first set of thresholds is, of course, defined around crashes. There is an overall bad behavior threshold where it says that if at least 1.09% of the users experience such crash across all device models, that would be considered an overall bad behavior. And the other one is about per device bad behavior, which basically is targeting single device models. And what's the other very bad thing that can happen to Android apps? Did somebody say NRs? Because that's true. So NRs stand for application not responding, and here the overall bad behavior threshold comes at 0.47%, and the per device is also at 8%. So make sure your app doesn't hit these numbers. Now that we're talking about stability, I put this code here because even if you worked with Android for a while, you for sure have written or seen this code at least once, because it's the connectivity manager that gives us all information about the device connections. And so basically, this is a great introduction into my next point, which is that we should always check how our app behaves in a specific device state, like no internet connection, airplane mode, right? Or slow internet connection, or unstable internet connection, or outdated Android operating system. This is where our app stability gets challenged. And this usually happens on low-end devices. So I would say those are the most interesting to test on. But as it is important to test on low-end devices, it is also to test with diverse user groups. Now you might wonder, why is this so? Well, let me tell you about this talk that I watched recently from Nicole McWilliams about innovation and digital well-being, where she basically explains about a gesture algorithm they've built, which was affected by the device sensor. So when you put it in your pocket, the algorithm worked with the device sensor. So initially they tested with a user group that was mostly, if not all, females, right? And when they increased the testing group, and include men as well, they found out something they haven't anticipated before, and that is that their algorithm does not work well for bigger pockets, because men have bigger pockets, apparently. And that was a launch blocker for them, because an app not working basically for all men, it's a good reason to block a launch, and it's also a good reason to test with diverse user group. You can check out the talk on this link. I absolutely recommend it. And the other thing that I would like to mention, just to check the time. Okay. So the other thing regarding stability that I would like to mention is third-party libraries. Now, third-party libraries are very convenient. So if you find something that we need from a library, that's great. But they can be also a double-edged sword, because they can be a source of crashes and ANRs. So I would say the most important thing would be to investigate and analyze them properly. Because, and what I mean by that is we should always ask ourselves, is this library maintained? Is it secure? Is there a community built around it, right? Because if we, let's say, add it to our application and decide to build other features on top of it, and then we realize that the authors don't want to maintain it anymore, they don't really care anymore, or it's a source of bugs, or it's unsecure. Now you have basically introduced a technical debt in your app, because now you should figure out how to remove this library, how to patch the code with all the features, and plus implement yourself the functionality. So I would say take your time to investigate third-party libraries. And also, if you do find such library, which is maintained as we want it to be, it's then our job to make sure we update our dependencies properly and regularly. And now that we mentioned security patches, I also would like to talk about security for a while. I mean, security, as you all know, is a huge separate domain of expertise, which we'll not even slightly cover here, but I added it for a reason. And that is because there are certain things that we as engineers, which are not security experts per se, should always be mindful of. And one of the things is actually that if we are handling some sensitive data, we should make sure that it's done securely, whether it's over the network, stored locally, it doesn't matter. We should always handle it in a secure way. But also, privacy is something that I wanted to mention here, especially user permissions. We all know that user permissions shouldn't be asked if we don't use it, but what developers tend to do is add certain permissions because they use certain code. After a long time, they decide to remove a feature or to remove a certain part of the code, and they forget to remove the permission as well. So at that point, you have a permission you are asking the user for, and actually you don't need it. So pay attention to that. And now I would actually want to focus on a certain particular security attack that happens with Android. If you recognize these 4 lines of code, you for sure know what I'm going to talk about. If you don't, this will be very interesting for you. So that security attack that I want to talk about is called Tapjacking. And what this actually is an attack where the user gets tricked by an overlay which is placed over your app with intention to capture the user touch. So, there are certain mitigations against this attack in certain versions of Android. For example, in Android 6, the users must explicitly give permission to an app to draw over other apps. And in Android 12 and higher, there is a certain blocking by default for full occlusion attacks. But there are also partial occlusion attacks. And there is also some conditions about the opacity of these overlays and so on and so forth. So as you can see, the users still, there are some loopholes where they can get tricked, or they can basically get tricked by the app to allow this permission, right? So, what we, as developers, can do, because we write the code, we have a big portion of control over what's going on in our app, right? And although we cannot for sure 100% guarantee 100% security, I believe we can do a lot to decrease this probability as much as possible. And to see how we can do that, let's first see what exactly this attack is. And you can see these two pictures here. On the right side is this, I'm not sure if you can all see it, but there is a dialog below the add overlay, which asks the user for certain permissions. It has a yes and a no button. And on top of that is this overlay with the advertisement, which basically covers the dialog. And when the user thinks they want to close the app, they don't see the dialog below. And when they click on the X button, their touch gets propagated, and they actually also allow the permissions without even being aware. A similar situation on the other picture. You can see this is, by the way, partial occlusion, where the overlay is placed only on the question. So the question is changed from do you want to grant these permissions to do you want to proceed? And if the user clicks yes, wanting to proceed, they will also grant these permissions. So this is, in example, what Tapjacking is. What we can do about it is, of course, use these lines of code. And there are, by the way, each of them you can use separately. And what they do is basically block the touches passed by overlays. You can also define your own security policy where you will identify such malicious overlays and actually try to verify the user intentions before passing such touch events. And also you can, in the recent versions of Android, hide overlay windows on certain screens in your app. And this is, by the way, very nicely also explained in the OWASP Mobile Application Security Verification Standard, so you can also check it out there, and of course in the Android docs. The other particular security vulnerability that I would like to mention today is unintentional data leaking. Now, this can happen in many ways, but there is a specific use case that I would like to mention today, which is screenshots. Now, how this can happen with screenshots? Let's say you have a banking app, right? Or whatever kind of app. You have a screen where you show some PII for the user, which is personally identifiable information. And let's say that the user at that point decides to put the application in the background. Two things happen. The first thing is that the operating system takes a screenshot. And this screenshot is cached on the device and is then used when the user comes back to the app to show the screen seamlessly. But you can also see the screen in the recent apps. So, which can be right for days until the application is in memory, until it's not killed by the operating system or the user. So, if you have a policy in your app which says, I will not show sensitive information before I authenticate the user, you have basically broken your policy. So this is basically also very easy to prevent, and believe it or not, it's just one line of code. And what this does is prevents screenshots. It prevents screenshots from the operating system, it prevents screenshots from the user. But if you don't want to prevent screenshots from the user, but you do want to detect when this happens, in the latest version of Android, so in Android 14, there is this API they introduced, which is called Screenshot Detection API, which is different from screenshot prevention. And what this does is basically it detects when the user physically presses the hardware buttons to take a screenshot. And it's also very easy to implement. It's just you have to declare a certain permission. There is a callback to implement, and you should also make sure that you register and unregister it appropriately in the start and the stop method. And the last thing that I would like to talk about today is code quality. Now, code quality is not an app quality per se. But I added it here because, let's say you've built your high-quality app, right? You add it on Play Store. And your intention is that a lot of people use it for a very long time, right? But if your app was not built on a healthy code base that can easily be scaled, so it can easily expand and can be easily maintained, then I would say be careful what you wish for. Because this can determine how long you will be able to maintain these app quality standards. And how I would like to describe this is through two parameters, which are scaling and maintenance. And here are my 3 tips about how to stay on the good side of code quality. First one is, I would say that you should always take your time to think well about the architecture and not rush into coding. We all want to shorten our time to market, right? We all want to see results, but believe me, taking your time to plan your architecture properly will save you a lot of time later. And when you do so, always have in mind the principle of separation of concern. So if you have one piece of code that takes care of certain concern, all the other code that is not related with that concern should be decoupled. And last but not least, have a decent test coverage, because, at least for your core app logic. So, you can read here more about what I just talked about, and you wanted to take a picture of that? So let's sum up the takeaways. If you want to have an app that is of a good quality, make sure that your app is easy to use and understand, is inclusive by design, it's stable, including non-happy paths, and also protects the user interaction and their data, and it's built on a healthy code base that can be easily extended and maintained. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Also, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak here. Thank you.